So over the last few years, I've had the opportunity of doing quite a few things in the photo and video space, making different types of content and different types of media for documentary work, for event work, for sports photography, portraits, etc., commissioned work, photojournalism assignments, and it has been a joy every step of the way. I've been fortunate enough to be able to pass down some of the information that I've gained to people whenever they ask, whether about how to write letters of intent, how to communicate with this person, how to start in your journey with certain things and building your portfolio. But whenever it comes to portfolio, I feel like there's one thing that I continue to mention that people don't really give any play to and kind of don't take as seriously as I believe that it should be taken. You see, a lot of the questions that I get is, hey, how do I get into XYZ so I could build my portfolio? Or, hey, how do I get connected with this person so I can get to this event and be able to build my portfolio? There are ways to be able to showcase your skills in these situations without having to fight your way or sneak your way into these types of events and venues. For portraits, a lot of people know you can ask your friends, you can ask your family, and that is a great way to be able to get into that avenue. But there's one piece of advice that I continue to give, and I just feel like it is never used the way that it should be, even though this one little genre of photography is literally what shaped my portfolio and is the reason why I started landing these jobs. I make a lot of money because I shoot street photography. In 2015-16, I was introduced to street photography, and I was introduced through the avenue of Gajan Balan and Jason Roman, aka Stock Easy. I think that's whenever they started, maybe 2017, 2018. But these two guys were the first ever street photographers I knew of. And mind you, again, whenever it comes to my photography knowledge, I didn't grow up looking at photographers, learning about photography, anything like that. My grandfather was the most famous photographer to me, and he just took photos of our family and cactus. I didn't have any photography idols, and I didn't learn about Joel Meyerowitz, Henri Cartier-Bresson, William Eggleston, Gary Winogrand, etc., these people until I was like 27, 28 years old. But I did know who Gajan Balan was. I did know who Jason Roman was, aka Stock Easy, and I did know that I liked the way their photos look. It was different than what I was doing in a corporate setting, and it was nice to be able to see people having fun with photography, and even more, the photos they were making had a certain look and feel to them that drew me in. So when I made the move to South Texas in 2018, I started taking tons of photo walks. Photos here and there of architecture, places, things, topography, of course some photos with people in it. I'd ask for street portraits, etc. And I started to build up a catalog of these things. And that's actually what I built majority of my portfolio on, to where in the year of 2020, I got hired for my first documentary gig. Someone that I hadn't talked to in maybe 3-4 years reached out to me because they found my website after looking me up online, saw my recent work, saw my street photography photos, and said, I love the work that you've been doing. I'm so glad that you're still taking photos and doing video work. Can you work on a documentary for me? And from there, I started working on a documentary about bull riders with the PBR, Cowboy Network, the Bullmen, and ABBI. Had to do nothing with me knowing it about cowboys, or I didn't have any cowboy portraits. I literally have been taking photos of people in the city, self-portraits of myself, or photos of my dog. The thing that drew him in, a later date I found out, were a whole bunch of street photography photos. He liked the way I took photos, the way things were with light. He liked the look, he liked the feeling. And so he reached out because I'd worked for him before. He appreciated what I was doing. And now he saw that the look and vibe he was going for matched what I was already creating on a day-to-day basis. And I know there are a lot of YouTubers who now say there's no money in street photography, why do it? Which always makes me laugh because it's always from the YouTube channels that literally make their money through their monetization on their channel because of their street photography videos. Of course, you can always sell your work, etc. too, and then hope you work out a masterclass or a workshop, but the way that I did it is a way that I think that a lot of people really should take a look at. I didn't have the nicest of nice cameras that people would think. I wasn't shooting a Sony A9 II at that time, or an A9 like I'd previously done. I wasn't working with that on my Canon R. I was shooting little Fujifilm cameras. Sometimes the maybe not as expensive ones with the plastic lenses is what I was using to supplement, I thought at the time, just supplement my portfolio, when it turned out to be the strongest part of it. And the reason being is because there was so much freedom when going out and create. I wasn't really worried about creating for someone else. I was looking for things that were pleasing to me, and it just so happened that the right people saw my work and linked up with me. And I mean, this has happened multiple times. I've gotten work from other people who they see me working and I send them my images and they love it, but then they look at my website, they look at my Instagram, and they see my street photography work, and then they want to hire me for more work because they like the photos they saw there. I think there's this misconception with street photography that it's just a hobbyist thing. It's just a thing that you do and you grow out of, but there's no place for it in a real professional lifestyle and workflow. And I just absolutely don't believe that's legit. And again, I didn't have to read books to understand this. I just watched people's YouTube. Again, Gajin and Stock Easy were literally, they still are, the two OGs to everything that I do today. I mean, Gajin, just like my boy Dorian Coleman, who is also an amazing street photographer, their Substack subscriptions to where they have their blogs that they send out, their newsletters, they're some of the best things to help put you out on game. And if you're not subscribed to either one of those or their channels, you should probably do that immediately. But there is a thing about street photography that people don't talk about, which is how easily it translates into so many other things. I mean, Gajin, Dorian, both do editorial photography, videography, both work events, etc., both do portraits, but the street photography is what stood out. The freedom and the instant ability to be able to create in their own expressions is what really stood out to me. And it wasn't because they were reading a book or because they were training and studying everyone. There's this idea that in street photography, if you're uneducated and don't know about the greats, you must not be, that good because you don't know about the legends, the people before you. And that's just complete and total bullshit. That's the beauty of street photography. Whatever's out there, you can take a photo of. Some of us live in places where there's not that many people around. I live in San Antonio, Texas right now, and there's not many places to go, or where, there's a whole bunch of big populace and it's very condensed like in New York, but you can make do. There are places, things, shadows, light, etc. to work with, topography and different types of things of that nature, documenting the larger cityscape of things. There are things to do that you can cut your teeth on that fall underneath the street photography genre of photography. And I don't want to get into the ethics of street photography and that kind of argument because, listen, I don't give a shit about what other people do. I have morals for myself on what I do with street photography, including things like not running up in people's faces with a flash or not taking photos of children or using photos of children unless a parent understands that I'm doing something or I ask the parent to take a photo. I'm not worried about that. Do I take photos of people and ask for their consent all the time? No, I do not. But I'm not making this path to go out of my way to capture as many faces as I can because to me, that's not my favorite form of street photography. So if you're someone who's very against street photography, you have an issue with it and you want to, leave a comment about, why it's unethical and stuff like this. Listen, there's two things that I want to remind you of. Number one, let me lean back to this. Image, durability, gangster, accessibility, and fun. Just follow that right there and you'll be fine. The second thing is just mind your fucking business. If someone does something that you don't agree with, either talk to them directly and confront them, not on the internet, but in person, or mind your fucking business. That's the thing that I just don't understand that happens a lot. We have boudoir photography and we love the art and we love the expression, the celebration of men and women's bodies no matter what. But there are boudoir photographers that are aggressive and who are taking advantage of vulnerable people. And we haven't canceled that or shut that down. The same thing for portrait photography. We haven't shut down portrait photography for people that are the exact same way, predatorial whenever taking portraits of men and women that are seen as vulnerable. But we haven't shut that down as a people. Don't even get me started on documentary photography where people who are of a more affluent background love to weirdly go to places like India, places in Africa, etc., and only take photos and travel to the places that are seen as common folk areas, taking photos and spending time with people who may have less than, taking photos of huts, people that are wearing classic traditional vintage garb, when literally there's a fucking suburb. Like these places have suburbs like a mile away. They have tall buildings, cityscapes, they have public transit, but you're only stuck in the highly populated places that look like poverty, but we don't call that out. So until you start calling out all that bullshit, then I don't want to hear anything about street photography. I'm not going to have the argument. I don't care if you don't like it. If you don't like it, mind your own fucking business and don't do it. But again, that's just my own opinion. And, I think you should follow it. But back to the whole thing about portfolios and street photography, it still is something that I put into my portfolio. If I really like images or something of the sort, I go ahead and add those in. I back in the day, which is weird because it was maybe like 6-7 years ago, but I was trained to, you print out your favorite photos, you print out about 20 of them, anywhere from 10 to 20, and you present in a little folder or a little binder that as your portfolio to everyone. That's how you do it. You just print those photos out, put them on pages, and then you take them places. And when you drop off your card, if someone is saying that they're looking for services, you just present them with that binder and ask them to look through it real quick so they can see what you're doing. I'd have photos of cars if I wanted to go into a dealership to get work there, photos of portraits, headshots, indoor, outdoor, photos of sports and things like that. I mean, you have everything that you need in that little portfolio, and you pick your favorite 10 to 20 images and then you present them as such. And now with Instagram, now with our websites, we still have the same thing to do. I still have a portfolio that I have in a PDF version that has different flip throughs of my favorite images or things that I feel like are very strong that I include with extra information at the end of where to go in order to see more work, that whenever I'm sending bids over email, that's what people get. They don't have to just go to my website. They have a PDF of my portfolio immediately that I made in Canva. And in that is street photography images. There's always going to be street photography images because that to me just really shows how strongly I can work just on the fly. Street photography helps me sharpen my mind and my eye for a lot of things like sports photography, tracking subjects on where they're going to go and having to be able to move quickly and shoot from the hip, understanding range and depth and what move to make with what, watching light, watching people walk in and out of light or in and out of natural framing. It is a great way to train yourself for architectural photography and noticing patterns, which is really big and not high value or high fashion. I don't want to ever say high value, but luxury real estate. Noticing patterns and different types of, shapes, how they accent each other, or color palettes and how they accent each other is a big deal in luxury real estate. My buddy Alexander Goki, who is one of the baddest asses photographers in San Antonio, one of the things that wows me about all of his work is the fact that it is so, in some weird way, even when it's not, symmetrical and so very clean. Now, part of that's because he's great at editing, great at automation, and great at just doing touch-ups and making his images look great. He's great at lighting, but also he has the correct eye to be able to sell these things to these people. Luxury real estate photography is an art, and he's crushing it, and he loves street photography. It's great for portraits and learning how to be able to talk to people. You know, a lot of people think that a portrait session should just be you showing up, taking photos, move like this, move your model. But the best photographers and portrait photographers in the world all time, the Gordon Parks, the Peter Lindbergh, people like that. The things that I read about them are how they communicate and talk to their subject to be able to get their guard down, but more importantly, to be able to get them to show different emotions because they're discussing through things that evoke actual emotion to where their responses are sincere and the body language is seen with it. Street photography is a great way to train that by asking people for permission for their portrait and being able to hear a little bit about them. A lot of times whenever I'm talking to people, taking their portraits on the street and everything, I spend a couple extra seconds asking how they're doing and just kind of talking to them about how the day's going, telling them what I do, showing them the photo, and just telling them I hope they have a good day. That little bit of interaction is not only good for you, but it's just good for your business acumen. Street photography is also great for one other thing. It's the most readily accessible type of photography that we have. It's the same way with nature. It's the same way with, shooting stars or whatever, nighttime photography. These are things that it's just available to us, period. You just show up. And that's one of the reasons why I have an issue when people attack street photography, because it's just funny that I mentioned people being predatorial in documentary photography, portrait photography, specifically boudoir photography, people being very predatorial. But it's just funny that we only attack the genre of photography that is easily accessible to people at every income point. And sometimes it seems like a very classist attack. But if we want to get into class warfare, you should look at my other channel, shout out Socialism. But these are just one man's opinions, and this one man's opinion is sincerely that street photography makes me a lot of money. It's the reason why I've been pulling in the checks that I haven't been doing the work that I have right now. A lot of my videography recently over the last year was inspired by just shots shots and views and layering that I usually do in my street photography, which to some of you may seem like, oh, you know, like everyone does layering, everyone does Dutch angles, blah, blah, blah. But it was inspired by street photography and stills that I shot. And that work got me these new contracts for this year, working for different places, just to make these 2-3 minute commercials. And it's fun as hell. And more importantly, it's bringing in revenue and income to me. It is something that I truly do enjoy and I truly do recommend. And more importantly, I think it's something that you can use to boost yourself up above the next person whenever it comes to building that portfolio of yours. I don't think it's something you should abuse. And let me be very, very clear. I mind my own f***ing business, so it is what it is. But I think that's one thing that we should all take into account. If we don't agree with something or don't like it, we shouldn't do it. And when people ask us why we don't do it, you can give your opinion, but the great thing about an opinion is it can be yours and no one has to give a damn about it. Which is just like me with people who are going to comment that they hate street photography because it's immoral and it's unnecessary. You can have your opinion, I just don't give a fuck. So yeah, start sprinkling some street photography into your portfolio. And if you're someone who's starting to look to get into work, look through your street photography catalog and see some images that you've made. Do they speak to how well you see color and composition? Do they see how well you see light and pattern? Those are some things that you can look forward to and see if your eye's being trained with that. See how well you do with natural framing, and see how well you do whenever it comes to just different types of things in street photography that you can take to your advantage and make happen. You guys, the amount of times that I've walked by and literally people are hooping and I just say, can I take photos? And literally have put that in, like I put that in my portfolio before. Really, really bad images, late at night, black and white, a lot of grain, but it looks cool because it was shot on Fujifilm and the grain pattern is nice. But you don't need to get into these expensive places or places where you can flex on the gram in order to build your portfolio. You just have to be willing to do the work, number one. And number two, you just have to be willing to work on the eye of your photography mind. And once you do that, I think it'll all be good. Moral of the story, street photography has made me money, continues to make me money, and will continue to be a cash cow for me because people like my images. With all that being said, I hope you guys understand where I'm coming from. Take it light, but take it. Have a good one.